End of season 4. We made it.
We did. This was a gauntlet. This one was different beast.
10 episodes, season 4. Recap. Looking ahead. We'll see how we go. Let's get into it. Roll the credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I am your host, Christopher Sellers.
From Portland, Oregon, I'm Brody Ipox.
We are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And what up, misfits? Season 4, episode 10. It's been a ride. Let's get into it.
This marks episode 50, by the way.
Does it? It does. It does. Because season 2 was 20 episodes. So this is episode 50. This is half a century. Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't see that. I didn't get that. Yeah. All right. So Misfits, here we go. Here's a quick recap if you're joining us. Here's what we've covered this season. Let us know what you're down for. We covered Misfit life skills. What are the life skills you actually need to live a happy and healthy and productive life? Episode 1. Episode 2, I brought in my former voice tutor from acting college to talk about pursuing your passions, and is that enough? You might remember that episode because Brody got sick halfway through and had to bail. But it was still a very good conversation. Episode 3 was hype and marketing and brand and what's the point and what's the difference and can we survive without it? But Brody makes his case. That was episode 3. Episode 4, we talked about a misfit dress code. Does style matter? Does first impressions matter? The way you dress, the way people perceive you, and you reflect your identity through your clothes. It's a thing. How much value should we place in it in the age of social media? Episode 5, as you know, was at interval. Episode 6, we talked about insecurities. I don't have any. Brody has all of the insecurities. So he wins. But we talked about what his were, what mine were, what the general consensus of insecurities are, how they affect us, and how should we broach them and get into them. Because you know, the longer you ignore them, the deeper and darker and harder they're going to get to shift, and they're going to catch up with you down the line. Episode 7, we brought in my man Mello to talk about emotional intelligence and can you teach it to corporate? Mello says yes. I'm still really dubious. Brody, you got a hot take on EQ just while we're here?
The thing that episode brought up was there was things that I had wanted to explore that I didn't think that I could put words to, you know what I mean? So like it hit the spot for me, and I loved Mello's take on it too. And I think coming onto social media, one of our most successful clips is the clip of him talking about how you can teach it in corporate. So
to some, maybe.
To
yeah. That was the qualifier.
To a certain degree.
To a certain degree. Like all things, you got to put the work in. Episode 8, we talked about filling the void, misfits, which sounds a bit abstract, but it's you know, we've all got that thing. Is it ambition? Is it money? Is it sex? Is it attention? We've all got like a deep, dark beast within us that needs feeding with not always the most positive actions. So what is that for you? What is that for the two of us? And how do we address it? Episode 9, we talked to Dr. Casey Smart. It sounds so neat about
it does.
About loneliness. Is there a loneliness epidemic? There is. Mm-hmm. And so where did this come from? And how do we address it? And what are some steps and strategies that you can put in place if you are subject to this thing, so it doesn't sort of cripple your lifestyle? And so here we are, neatly at episode 10 with a bit of a season wrap up. Brody, I've just done the highlight reel. Was there anything in particular that stood out, or you'd want to go back and revisit, or anything like that?
I would, honest to God, I know people hate it. They always want the next guest, but I would love to have all of our guests from this season again at some point. I mean, because the conversations, and I don't know if it's just us, and I'm not tooting my own horn here. This is what the recaps are about, the learning experience, and recanting what worked and what hasn't. And I feel like our vibe with guests, as opposed to the podcast I listen on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, LinkedIn fam, but fuck, it is hard. It's hard to fucking listen. It's so robotic, and
You're not allowed to swear as much.
oh,
We had that chat before we
we
came. Anyway,
did.
go. I won't interrupt you,
No,
but like last time we had a chat,
thank you.
Misfits is like, Brody's like, I swear too much. I'm trying to get
Too
clips
much.
and I swear way too much.
It's like 7 times in a 30-second clip. That's a
and
little
your kids
ridiculous.
are listening, bro.
Yeah,
Not cool.
I know. Yeah, but anyways, guess, and the vibe that we bring, the conversations just feel so natural. And I think when you look at what's really successful right now on like TikTok and Instagram and things like that, it is those real, authentic interactions between people, whether it's on a podcast or they're just making content or whatever it might be. It's that realness to it, and we got it. I mean, I had a couple weeks here at Misfits that was pretty tough couple weeks. And I what I did was actually go back and listen to all our episodes. I sat there for a full day, and
I didn't know that.
Day and a half, yeah. And it's one thing to create something that you believe in because of what you're creating, but then it's another thing to go back and listen to it. And I hate my voice. I hate the amount that I know, but I like really do. I'm like, dude, and I hate the cursing, and it's interesting to go back and listen to it, and still, even when I'm cringing at that stuff, I'm enjoying the conversation that's being had. And I think where I'm at in my life is really introspective. I'm at that point where I'm just looking inward a ton all the time. So that might be part of it. But God, we have great conversations that, again, my tattoo artist, for instance, has checked out the podcast. She said it so well. It really is not just the B-sides where it's, we've had the conversation and we just don't bring it up in a public spectrum. Yeah. No, these are conversations that people aren't even having, right? Like it's up here and everybody's experiencing it, and we all want to communicate and connect on some of these things, but we just don't. And for whatever reason, it just feels like every conversation we have with a guest, or even between us, there's a moment of permission where it's like, I catch myself where in some of our episodes, I'll be like, you know what? I need to go sit down and talk to my dad. Or I need to go sit down and have a conversation with Tiffany. Because I'm really taking the permission from the things that we're talking about and applying it. It's like, holy shit.
That's cool. That's kind of the point of a podcast or a conversation, isn't it?
I would hope so. But the more that I try to compare, and this is one of the things I think got me really fucked up over the last couple weeks, the more I try to compare, because I was trying to come up with a case study for you, to be honest, to show where we're at and that it's viable and that it feels good and it's right. It's right. I'm looking at other people, and I had a Chris moment. I'm gonna call it that. I had a Chris moment where I'm looking at just this dog shit on social media, and I can't. How does this have a million views? You can't. What? It's horrible. I can't even get. And then you even go to the comments, and there are people going, "What? Why? This is cringy," or like, "Oh my God, right. What? Why are we interested in?" Literally asking these questions, and it's like, I don't know if it's the algorithm. I don't know if it is just that attention span thing where it's like you looked just long enough, you know what I mean? And that's what triggered it all.
Or it's been paid to be put in front of you.
Or it's been paid or placed, or the parameters are different for that day. It's just, you get really sucked into that spiral. And the thing is, I haven't been for a long time. I've been able to disassociate easily, and I think you know that. I can step outside of it very easily and be like, look, this is actually what's happening. This is where we can take it, and yes, there's things that look like this, but realistically, you have to ask yourself those questions. And I just wasn't. I was just comparing, and it was, we're not even having those dumbass conversations, like we're not even in the same world as what we're trying to do and accomplish. So I don't have anything to justifiably compare it to. And I've taken a look at some like psych podcasts and like mental health stuff, and there look there are some successful ones. There's some definitely successful ones. Lots of downloads, lots of listens, active listeners on Spotify. They do great, but at the same time, not anywhere near the crap I'm talking about. Not, the garbage that we're like, holy, how is this perpetuated? I mean, I just don't even get it. And I'm even talking about, Chris, stuff like, I don't need to see fucking Peterson with 90 different people. I really don't. You know what I mean? There's a point in time where I get your view and your philosophy, and now you're just trying to encroach it on every different type of.
And that's an algorithm thing. Unfortunately, it's the car crash. It's the car crash analogy. Like, no one would wish for a car crash, but if we see it, we all stop and go, "Oh shit, a car crash!" But then to an algorithm that goes, "Ooh, you like car crashes, do you?" And like feeds you this stuff. And look, it's the same. It's the same for me whenever I'm scrolling through like YouTube and I get caught in like a YouTube Shorts tunnel, and fall down this rabbit hole, and then it starts throwing me manosphere videos, like particularly of Fresh and Fit. And again, it's like 10-second, like really tightly edited clips where they come off like, we're such bosses because we're like shouting down girls at a table. I mean, the fuck. And I watch this and like, to you, I'm like, my mind's blown. I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is ridiculous. But now, and because YouTube's caught me spending more than 10 seconds on this, it goes, "Oh, you like that, do you?" I'm like, no, bro, I don't. This is insane. But but unfortunately, this is how. It's I've realized lately, because we're here, I've realized lately the whole it's tabloid news, just at scale. Like it's shock jock. It's like all the LinkedIn copywriters, for instance, like, you got to master a hook. It's like, so just replace hook with headline. That's how newspapers got sold.
Yeah,
you had to have a snappy big print, snappy headline that will get you to pick up the paper, open the first page, figure out if you're going to spend $1 or $2, right? The principles are exactly the same, but now everyone wants to call themselves a LinkedIn ghostwriter, copywriter. Like, sure, it's been around forever, bro. But it's the same shit with, unfortunately, like with all this sort of content, is like, I've got to excite, shock, get your curiosity, trigger you in some way, like trigger an emotional reaction in some way, in order for you to engage. Now, there's, again, trigger an emotional reaction. There can be positive emotions of like curiosity, of interest, of fascination, of excitement. There's negative emotions as well, like you all know, right? But unfortunately what you find is there's a reason why trash tabloids still exist and have been around forever. It's because it's exactly the same parallel with trash social media. If I appeal to the lowest common denominator, if I am controversial, like half the people are going there to hate on you as much as they are to go like, fuck yeah, this is accurate.
Not even realizing that they're feeding it, by the way.
Right. And now the difference between tabloid magazines back in the day is for the 50% that this is fucking ridiculous, they don't pay. They don't buy, right? But for algorithms, it all just triggers to engagement, which you know how it works. Like, there's ad revenue, so it's worth your while being a controversial trolling douchebag,
It is.
whether you believe it or not, because that's how you build quick and fast. And I guess this is sort of coming all the way around to your point. If you're like us and you kind of go completely in the opposite direction, what's growth going to look like? And the short answer is, folks, very slow.
Much different, and that's the thing too, is a lot of the things that I've again had in comparison, and I've told Chris this too, in detail. I've worked on a ton of shit that, okay, I won't say that I'm not proud of, because I'm proud of the work that I've done, but the impact and I hate that word. That the impact and the authenticity of a lot of these projects is really low on the scale. Really low.
Okay.
It's just lowest impact or resistance to entry. What can we do? All those garbage shit, and it works. It sucks that it works, but it works because, just like you said, and I think you nailed it. It pays to be annoying. It pays to be annoying. It pays to be fucking annoying. And that's
it does now.
Which is such horseshit. And this is the thing I was trying to say when you were talking, is like, we don't even realize that 90% of the time the people that contribute it and are trying to combat it, right? They're like, hey, you guys, this is stupid. Look at this shit. What are you watching? What are you consuming? This is ridiculous. They don't even realize, because like you said, the algorithm doesn't look at it like, oh, this comment is a bad comment, I'm going to shove it way down here, or I'm going to delete it, or I'm going to take the hit on engagement. It says, this is engagement.
There's a video I watched a while ago by a channel, JD Signifier. He's a black.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, so he does. Black guy in the States, does video essays, mostly on like black culture, black masculinity. That's his thing.
Yeah,
so it's really fascinating as an Australian to observe and listen and learn in this space. He's done a couple of videos on the manosphere, and obviously he's coming from like a leftist perspective and like debunking all of this for reason, like it's just categorically untrue, but it appeals to a certain demographic of men for these reasons. And the reasons is there's the absence of either role models or direction or whatever this happens to be. But the point he made in relation to all of this is like, look, unfortunately, if you're one of these channels that takes the moral high ground but still comments on these folk over here, you're still perpetuating the ecosystem.
Yep.
Because you're going to draw two types of audience to your video. You're going to, again, draw the fans that go, I recognize this, I understand this, I see it for what it is. You're also going to draw the haters because it's in the manosphere. Like, you don't get it. You're a simp, you're a cuck.
And those motherfuckers will hunt you down, which is simpy and cucky. I'm fucking sorry, folks. Right.
And so it's a catch-22, but even talking about the thing, it becomes this echo chamber of feeding into and perpetuating the thing. It was really interesting because he had about 3 or 4 other colleagues who have done similar video essays, and more than one. Whereas I think there was an Australian girl who had done one episode on the manosphere, which he mentioned, and that was it. It's like, there's my one. We're done here. We're moving on. You know what I mean? So he actually gave her props. Of like, you know, she did her bit. She's not, and because he also recognizes that I could do counter manosphere videos from now until the end of time, and
Touché.
And would draw a following and would gain. Yeah, what I like about him as well is he's completely transparent about the fact that these video essays that I make are for a channel that I treat like a business that will drive engagement, that allows me to feed my family and do these things. Completely transparent about that.
Real.
Completely transparent about that. And so he can identify that, like, if you look back at some videos that I've done on the manosphere, they've rated quite highly in views for all of it, because the debates kick off in the comments. Right? And so there is that game of find a controversial topic, take a controversial stance, because it's whatever you can do in order to trigger engagement, blah, 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 blah. But unfortunately, that's what, for YouTube, if you want to play this game, this is what will drive views and engagement and revenue. Yeah? So That's for YouTube. That's the nature of the beast. And so you've got to start looking at if this is the conversations that you and I, want to have. And YouTube is a place for them as much as Spotify and other LinkedIn and other places are the place for them. Or you can come and work with us independently. It's, it's that funny thing.
Yeah, it is. I want to just for a second. I want to stay here because look, the thing is, I just had a conversation with a friend too, and you said that, and it put it perfectly for me. We were talking about the same thing along the same lines, controversial topics, that kind of thing. Because I had said that I was like, dude, it's just, and you and I have had that conversation. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go
No,
gimmicky.
And we swore we'd never do reactionary content. So.
No, I don't. It's not real to me. And I told him that, and he goes, but like, aren't you guys kind of doing that? And I was like, what? And he's like, no, I don't mean like the videos themselves. I just mean like, your topics are kind of controversial. And I was like, they're not though. Like do you know what I'm saying? Because like that's where I look at it, and then from outside in, people look at the topics and they go, "Oh shit, is that even something that I actually want to allow someone to have an opinion on for me or around me?" I
get. Now that you mention it, I'm trying to do a quick. The first video that popped to mind was, the video where I was sexually harassed by my boss at the time. And
yes,
that was post Depp and Heard court case. Yep. And at least like a month or two afterwards, so that it all kind of simmered down. But we ended up discussing like sexual harassment in the workplace, and like it can happen to men. So it's funny that you mentioned that. Like I suppose I hear it. I'm more oblivious to it, and I probably hear it more as an artist and as a creative, because you just get used to stepping into those spaces. It's sort of like, it's for all the creatives and the artists, you'll get it. It's like, oh, it's a little bit spicy, a little bit taboo, a little bit hot in this room. I've got to step in and see what it's all about. But like with curiosity, not to burn the house down, but just really, and so then, in retrospect, I'd hear people going, I can't believe you. Wow, brave. That's normally the comment I get. And so the only way I can translate that for me is to go, oh, you think it's brave. To me, it was a Tuesday. Okay. So that means, like, to the general person who probably isn't me or lived this experience, this must seem like a high mountain to climb. Okay.
Good analogy.
I guess. Yeah. So that's. But controversial topics. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I guess you're right. To me,
I remember when we talked to April at last season, and you were terrified of talking about diversity in work. Does diversity and inclusion work? As a white boy in Portland, and my girl April from Tampa. Yeah, but that,
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think it's just interesting to take a step outside of it, because it has become so second. That's what I was saying with our vibe with guests. It's become so second nature to us to be in this space and be able to explore and be here comfortably, that when I think about the things that we are exploring, it's not this big, dark, crazy, ominous thing that I think a lot of other, I'll tell you, man, I think the more and more I talk to, because what I'm doing too for the podcast recently is I've started asking people I wouldn't ask. Because I've got a lot of inside opinions. And those are really hard to gauge. If they're real or if they're, biased. The more and more I find someone that has listened to it and is willing to have a conversation with me about it. For instance, I want to share this with you after this episode. I'll send you the screenshots. I think he's 16. He's a family friend. He's a 16-year-old kid that, one of our friends, that's his son. And he messaged me out of nowhere, and he was like, hey, dude, I actually listened to one of your episodes for the first time, and this is one of the first podcasts I could actually find myself listening to. Now, he's known about the podcast. Now the reason that I bring him up as an example, because he dove in and he was like, oh, cool. I can get behind sitting in a living room and listen to someone talk about something that I might not be brave enough right now in this moment to talk about for myself.
Do you know what episode it was?
I don't want to make the Misfits wait, but let me see if I can find the conversation.
No, it's okay, because that's really sweet. I've only really got one friend who listens religiously, and she's a super fan. Hey, Charms. Shout out to Charms. She always loves when I give her a shout out. By the way, I gifted Charms a t-shirt because she's been a super good friend to me in the last couple of weeks, and she is a super fan, and so she's got a t-shirt now.
Awesome.
Yeah. But I caught up with her this week and we talked podcast things. But yeah, go ahead.
Very exciting, because it was an episode that you and I thought was kind of a flop. It was episode 1, Misfit Life Skills.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool.
And that's a 16-year-old boy. You know what I mean? Like, not that when we're talking episodes, when we're talking about audience, that's not our target.
We didn't lay out aim for the 16-year-olds. Yeah.
No, but look, I think that's the thing. And you and I had talked about it a little bit. I'm jumping around here, but I'm going to bring it full circle. You and I had talked about it. AI, right? There's going to be an oversaturation of hot AI garbage just down the pipeline, coming. It's going to be, you're going to get annoyed and you're going to want something different. I think the same thing with the content that we're talking about, that even with people being like, this sucks, this is cringy, like, and it's still being perpetuated because it gets that trend factor. They are still looking for more. They're still looking for that space to be filled, and I think the general consensus is that it's just a bunch of that shit. And there's not necessarily another option that isn't the psych podcast or the mental health. Because I'll tell you what, I think a 16-year-old kid is not listening to the mental health podcast. 16-year-old Brody would not have. And you tell me I have to talk to a counselor, I'm punching you in the mouth. I'm punching you in the mouth. And I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere where you can't fucking put me in a room with someone I have to talk to. Same thing with podcasts like that. I think that feels like an I have to thing. Like when I'm so depressed, I just don't have an option. I'll go listen to that episode. Like, that's the thing. But there's not that just general consumption of something more, something with substance, something with something I can grab onto other than just forget about 15 minutes from now. Because I mean, how many social media clips do you think you've actually watched in the last year, Misfits? In the last year, 365 days, total clips watched. How many do you remember? That's insane. That's insane. I know you're thinking of a crazy number in your head, and I know you can't think of a damn one of them. So just put it into perspective like that. I think, again, the 16-year-old kid that's kind of just now exploring content and like trying to find something. That's why his exact words were, this is something that is interesting that I can actually sit and listen to. He doesn't have to be fed it. It's not directed at mental health stigma or conversation. These are topics that we talk about regardless if you're depressed, regardless if you're freaking bipolar. These things are just part of life that apparently not a lot of people have the gumption to go and talk about in a public space, which to me is like insane, because all of you will do the craziest shit for attention, and you will be so controversial, and you'll just this but then you have this entire audience starved and looking for something real. We're lucky. We're absolutely lucky that at our 50th episode, this is where we're at. That's our identifying factor that goes, we have the fucking space. As much as it right now is a big empty auditorium, we're here. We're setting up in the back. We're setting up in the back. The ticket booth hasn't opened yet, but we're setting up in the back. Okay, so yeah, that I feel like I brought it. I feel like I brought it back around. I think
Sure, Misfits, you be the judge.
Yeah, please.
Did he
in
get
the
there
comments.
in the end?
Yeah.
I think I'm just looking back over our list of what we've done this year, and I think it's. I don't know. I liked the season. I know it was probably a little bit abstract and probably a little bit more under the surface than what we've talked about, but I actually really liked it. I've loved having all the guests on, like you. Yeah.
What's been your favorite episode? What's been your favorite episode
This season?
Yes, this season.
It's tough. I liked life skills because I thought it was constructive. I liked having a chat with Linda because I like having a chat with Linda.
Even though I entirely fucked up.
Yeah, it's all right. But I thought it was interesting to have like a former acting tutor of mine saying, passion isn't enough, and I think that's a really bad direction to go in acting colleges. And I went, aren't you supposed to like fan the flames of like youth and inspiration? And she's like, nah.
And I loved her consistency on calling us on our shit. Like when we were explaining one thing the way that our brain was framing it, and she goes, "Yeah, that's kind of not it."
Yeah, she saw it as process or like whatever else. Like, okay, yeah, that's like, interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Insecurities, I think insecurities was a good chat. That gets to what you were talking about, like who openly talks about that.
Nobody.
Or what yours are, how to deal with them, the fact that everybody has them. That's what I was going to ask before. It's like, do you think then, because I guess the topics are sort of charged in a way now that I'm reading it back objectively.
We also write them.
Insecurities, filling the void, loneliness. Yeah. Like we don't shy away from the big stuff. But do you think then that sort of content, those sort of topics, like push people away? Like they're like, I can't. That's too heavy. That's too much of a downer. I don't want to listen to it. Or what have you. Like I personally feel they're worthwhile conversations to have, because again, like if the whole point you think they're heavy or it's whatever, you avoid it. And so if everyone's avoiding it, then we got an issue. Yeah. So
yeah, no. But see, I mean, even if, like you said, even if everybody was avoiding it, it's like I wouldn't mind being the dude knocking on the door. Like, I will say this. I do think that with certain episodes, and I think that reflects. I think we've had a couple examples throughout the seasons where I've been like, pay attention with our title and our topic. This might be something that doesn't perform as well just because the algorithm views it the way that you're talking about.
You can't talk about this. Yeah.
Right. And for those reasons, though, people will attack it. People aren't ready for it. People don't want to hear it. People aren't interested. And again, I don't actually think that's the truth. I do think that yes, there are some episodes that when you at first glance look at it, you decide you're making a commitment. I mean, really, honestly, I think that's why a lot of the times our episode ones are so successful, because as much as they're not so far away from where we are end of season, they are our soft entry to this. They always are. Yeah, and they perform well. They every single one of them, and that comment's a testament to it, where it's like he had almost 50 episodes that he could have gone through. And the first one that he goes is episode 1, Misfit life skills. And I've told you this too. I think in Misfits, you can confirm or deny in the comments. I think all of us chronologically approach things. So like when you see a piece of content or you're exploring a piece of content, you don't just generally reach for episode 7, season 4. You know, you will go to episode 1, season 1, check it out, get the vibe. The thing about that too is I don't think it would push people away though. Like I think once they take that 2-minute bite that we put on social media or the clips that we have that are I think the Misfits hate how out of context are. We even have some diehard YouTube fans that are on our YouTube commenting all the time, and they'll say some shit about our clips just being out of pocket. But that's
AP. That's I know. Hey, I see you, AP. Anyway,
and look, that's our farthest shtick, you know what I mean? Like I'd say that's our farthest feed into the gimmicks, you know, is like being willing to take some of our conversations a little out of context and put them in a short form clip. But I don't know. I don't know how to answer that fully, because I do get what you're saying, and I do think that's a possibility, but I also do think that I'm willing to die on the hill that people are starved of it. I really think that once they come across it and make that commitment, it's not that big scary thing anymore. It's that permission to start exploring this shit, because again, I don't think it's any one of these topics that we've talked about. I think it's if you take the dichotomy of us having conversations like this and just that, and sit it right here in front of someone, there is so much that they have not talked about, and it might not be any one of these topics, but they just haven't they haven't been willing to bring it to the table. And I think we blow the lid off that every time. I think every single time I walk away from listening to an episode, that's the way I feel as well. As like, even if it's not something directly related to the episode, I'm ready to go have an open conversation with someone. So I'm not sure. You Misfits, you tell us. Is it scary? Is it too? Are some of the topics? Is it? Does it feel like you're taking on a challenge? You know, like what is it?
Every week.
Right.
Expose your soul once a week, every week. Yep.
Hey, that's not a hard ask though. I mean, like once a week, take a look inside. You know, like shit. Pop the hood once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. You had something on your. What did you want to talk about? You had something on your list.
Okay, so highlights, season 5, blah blah blah. It's I mean, we touched on it very briefly earlier. I have, in the last couple weeks, Misfits, had an extremely rough time mentally, and I don't want this to be the kind of trauma pawning you see on. I really don't, because it gets me sometimes. You'll see those guys, they're in a podcast and they're like, I'm just fucking up. Damn it. I wish I could do better. And everybody likes it because you get it. You say the same shit in your head. I'm not trying to do that. I've just had a really, really tough couple of weeks. My mother passed last year. I've got a new baby. We are actually trying to build something of substance. And I've operated on completely different guidelines for projects that are not like this, not like this at all. So I've had to do a ton of readjusting over the last couple of weeks that I realistically didn't think I had to do, which was my naivety, you know, like that's it is what it is. But I wanted to sit and talk with you guys about that because, number one, I'll share a little bit, you know, about my own experiences and things like that. But this is one of the conversations I don't think a lot of us have. Me and Chris have had this conversation in behind closed doors, production meetings and things like that. As much as I've been going through it, and I know that when I explain it and I have my piece, people relate because that's what people do. It affects more than me. And I think it's only fair that, as you know, we're talking about this in this episode, that we're trying to be the best versions of ourselves. We're trying to talk about things that matter. We're trying to have an impact. It would be a disservice of myself to say that it doesn't affect things or not open the conversation to what that looks like on the other side of things, so my mental health can be one thing, but what does it leave in its wake, and it's real, and it's something that I hope when we walk away from this conversation, again, there's a little bit of permission for yourself to take a look at the wake behind you, and maybe a little bit of permission for people to see that even though the wake is there, the boat's still running, and that's important. That's important. That matters. So yeah, I mean, let's start there. Last couple weeks have just been brutal. I've been going through a real mental monologue that I haven't suffered from since my early 20s, and that's just this negative, hopeless, weird, mean version of myself that is mad at myself. I'm not even necessarily mad at anything else around me, and it's the most incredibly frustrating and exhausting thing. And I'll say this, I've had physical symptoms over the last few weeks that I think now, after sitting down with my family the last couple days and the last week that I've had, have come from what I'm doing to myself up here. And I'm just tired of it. I'm just over it. I know what I have on the line. I know what I have in if I'm victorious in my endeavors. So it's an interesting thing to know these things, have these conversations, be in this space, and still struggle with it. To still struggle. And I think one of the things over the last couple of weeks that I wanted to share with the Misfits is that even though I've had that, it's just almost disappointing. You hear that voice in your head and you're like, I thought I fixed this. I thought I grew up a little bit, like this is silly, that's going to come around, I think, for the rest of your life in waves and phases and in different dialects, almost. And I think that's where I wasn't prepared for it, because in the past it was, oh, fuck you, fuck this, the world sucks, everybody's against me. And it was very easy to dissect, that voice and kind of negate the things that it was saying. And now it's just a little more fine-tuned at getting through to me. And that's, again, something I wasn't prepared for, coming up with scenarios in my mind that Chris would leave if I did this, or Tiffany and the kids would hate me if I was this certain way, or blah, all of these things that it's no longer just telling me, oh, you suck ass. It's creating false realities and scenarios in my head that physically affect me and the way that I work. And I just want to share, you don't have to listen. You don't. I know it's so simple and it's so ridiculous, but that's one thing that I don't hear in any of these TED Talks or things about mental health. They all will make you aware that the voice exists so you don't feel crazy, right? But they don't just flat out tell you don't have to listen. They give you these tips and tricks around it, and these affirmations and all these things that you can do to make it quiet. It's like at some point you can just say, I'm not listening. And I'd say over the last 3-4 days, that's had the biggest impact in my life that I've ever had. I almost, for instance, on Sunday, I know we cut the meeting short because I was feeling a little sick physically, but I almost didn't do it. And I was like, stop. So Misfits, like the stuff that I've been struggling with, and the trying to build something and nobody really knowing what you're going through and all that kind of lonely stuff, it's there and it's real and it's honest, and I'm allowed to experience it, and I'm allowed to hear that stuff in my own internal monologue. But at some point You have to take action, or you have to choose to step away from the situation. And I think over the last 3 weeks, which is shitty, because that's the thing that I was telling you. It's like, I talk about these things and I do these things, but you still actively have to do the work. You can say it 1 week. You can say it 1 week and have the realization, and then physically something hits you and, oh, are you really going to do it? Is that fuck, I'm just a little tired of being tested. Can we just have perfect conditions where the classroom is 72 degrees? I have a fucking 2 sharpened number 2 pencils, and I'm good. I'm good to go. I'm good to go. I feel fine. I ate breakfast that morning. Everything's good. That's just not life. That is just not life. And as frustrating as that is, again, Misfits, it's okay to just live in that for a second too. Because one thing that I will say, for 3 seasons prior, I went through my mother's death. I went through a lot personally after that I just trucked through. I was just trucking through. And it's not always necessary. Sometimes it pays to stop when the shit hits the fan. Because now, when the shit hasn't hit the fan, I'm a year away from that spot, and I'm now dealing with the repercussions. That's a little silly. I could have saved myself. So hindsight's 2020. Don't have to listen to the internal voice, and the only answer is move away from the situation or choose an action to make it better. Now, please, tell the Misfits what a sack of crap I am.
No masochism here. It's funny, while you were talking, it reminded me of a video I would have referenced to you, and I watched probably about a month or two ago. And it was on toxic shame by...
Oh, you did? That was the...
Yeah, so it's
Big Think.
No,
right?
I've got it here. Like Heidi Priebe. It's like her last name is Priebe. So it could be Priebe or Priebe. I'm unsure. But toxic shame with Heidi Priebe. And she gives you a third alternative, specifically for shame. But you can apply this to other emotions of resistance that you might be feeling. Because if you notice, it does this yo-yo thing of like you playing... Yeah, okay. So if you're taking an action, but it's sort of putting in the same spot, so you go back to square one. So shame will inhibit you from doing a lot, right? So what your emotions and then the actions from those emotions are delivering you back to exactly the same spot for reasons. She's got a third option. Which was the first time I've heard of it. You can you can either ignore the voice, but like you say, it's never going to go away. There's that. You can take some sort of action, which in some cases can be avoidant. And men...
It is. I won't deny that.
No, sure. So for men, for instance, like you will commit to work. We will be busy. We won't listen to the voices in our head. We will get, we won't, like, yes, life's hard, but we just, and women might do the same thing. Like, I'm going to clean the house. I'm stressed. I'm going to just burn off all this energy. Fine. So Heidi gives you a third option, specifically with shame. She's like, sit in it. Sit in it and really sink down into it and wallow in it for a moment, because this is something we seldom do with uncomfortable emotions. Shame, like a lot of uncomfortable emotions, to me is often like a hot plate on the stove. Like, you'll notice it's warm, you'll go to put your hand on it, you'll get like a little bit of a tss, and you go, ooh, and you withdraw straight away. Right? As a reflex, you withdraw straight away. And that response to us is often, okay, be busy. Or, oh no, wait, don't listen to it. It is not an innate natural response to go, no, put your hand back on the hot plate and keep it there. Because in the world of emotions, if you're feeling shame specifically, there's a reason you're feeling it. And if every time you touch the hot plate and you reflex withdraw and walk away, you never really understand where that heat's coming from. So if you sit in it and go, yeah, I'm ashamed, and you go, oh, I feel sick, and I feel shitty and I feel sick and your voice drops half a register. and you work, okay, well, I feel ashamed and this is what I feel like. Why do I feel ashamed? And if you listen to the episode with Mello on emotional intelligence, you just sort of keep asking why until you get right to the bottom of it. Like, why am I ashamed? I feel ashamed for these reasons. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from an early sense of this and that, like what happened and this might have happened and it made me feel this way. And it's always kind of played out like that and whatever, but you get to sit in this thing. Look, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I went through this process probably about a month or two ago when I watched this video and shared it with Brody. I can't remember now what I was trying to process, which is interesting.
That is
because there's been a lot of other stuff since then, but it very much was like actually accepting first that I'm ashamed of myself, or I feel ashamed for reasons. And I journal, so I'll write all of it out and you go, okay, well, where does this come from? And it comes from here and it comes from there. And, what I really want is this. I'm pretty sure it had to do with women, if I remember, and like wanting attention and that sort of stuff. So, and that's right. If I pursue or if I feel a longing for or an ex or someone that I shouldn't really be with, I'll get ashamed and go, no, delete all the contacts, don't do anything. Say, okay, no, you're allowed to still, that's what it was. You're allowed to still want connection from people. Connection and intimacy, like that's a valid thing. And the most immediate frame of reference is probably going to be an ex or this person or that person or whatever else. So the impulse to feel that's what sort of triggers shame. And I'll go, well, fuck off, just cut them off. But I've noticed it hasn't gone away. Like in years, it hasn't gone away, right? So sitting in it and go, yeah, I actually want attention. I actually want attention and affection and commitment. And you sit all the way into that. And it's probably because I've never really had a nurturing upbringing. So I'll associate this sense of human want and need for affection as something that I shouldn't have or don't deserve to have. And that's where again, we're talking about uncomfortable subjects, Jesus Christ. But for me personally, that can bring up like a deep sense of hot shame and embarrassment. But now I've learned it's sort of normal for most people. Like most people want to have connection, and I do too. So I'm kind of normal in that sense. It's okay. And this is where, like the heavy work's being done, is because it takes a week or two or maybe more to rewire and reframe what it is that you want. Now, in my, pseudopsychology 101 amateur class, most emotions, like you need to get to the root of them to understand, where it is, where it comes from, if you want to change it, otherwise, you need to rip it's not a weed, but you need to rip a plant out from the root and take all of it. Otherwise, you're just pruning, and that means you're training it to go where you want it to, which isn't always healthy, and you don't always understand it. So the whole summary of all of this is, yes, if you're in an uncomfortable position, sometimes it's ignore it, move on. You don't need to dwell on it. Sometimes it's, choose some sort of an action. And sometimes it's, well, take a moment to sit in it and wallow in it, because we seldom do that in life. Like it's bad to be indulgent. It's bad to feel sorry for yourself. If I'm going to reference Brody specifically, I know he probably hasn't taken more than a week to just put tools down and grieve and go, this fucking sucks. Because it was no sooner did his mum, you had a long period of pre-grieving because you knew she was sick and this was sort of a one-way street. And then she passed, and then it was sort of Christmas, New Year, which we all know is madness. Then it was a newborn daughter. So it's been an emotional roller coaster, and all of that stuff's going to get wrapped up in one thing. As well as, responsibilities I can't even comprehend, of like being a partner, being a father to a whole bunch of other kids, wanting to work on stuff for yourself. So it's no wonder that it all kind of gets spread very, very thin. And also and especially as men, like, do we ever have the opportunity to put tools down and go, I am feeling like shit this week. You know, we can observe the consequence of not doing so. You know, of men of male burnout eclipses everyone else. Male suicide eclipses everybody else. So we can observe the negative consequences of like being tough and being a man. You know, is there any space, folks, for men to be gentle and vulnerable for a time because they feel like they need to?
Yeah, you know what? I want to say two things. I'll answer that first. I think yes, when you ask for it. And I know that sounds shitty, Misfits. A lot of people go, "Oh, you shouldn't have to ask for it. People should know." We're adults. We're adults. You can't always read somebody's mind. And like Chris said, I think as men, and I'm not in the most non-misogynistic way, I'm just saying we shove shit. And it's not for any other reason than we've been programmed and taught that we have to. So there's not a lot of instances where we ask, over the last few weeks, not only from you have I been given an incredible amount of grace. Tiffany and my grandmother have just been a godsend as well, because and you know this, and I told them this, I've been strong for them, right? I've been, and I have. I'll go talk to my grandmother and listen to her cry about my mother. I'll rub Tiffany's shoulders at the end of the day when she's tapped. There's no one there doing that for me, and this last couple weeks, again, I asked for it. I asked for it. I said, I'm drowning. I'm drowning. I feel like I'm trying to build fucking Rome, and you guys are watching me do it, and I'm getting no help where you can give it. And what I meant by that was, I don't need you to help me build the podcast. I don't need you to help me build the business. I need you to help me create the space. I need you to help me nurture the mindset. I need you to help me. I need you to help, just a little bit, so I know that I'm not alone. And the last couple weeks have just been amazing between you and them. I feel blessed because I know not a lot of people have that. The second thing that I wanted to touch on there is the thing that the analogy that you just made. I feel like one thing that I want to say is, a lot of people, it's not even just that there's those three options. I feel like we look at it as such, right? One and or the other. When you were explaining that to me, it felt really, really neatly knit, that it was a process. And for me, it would be sit in the shit, then ignored the shit. You've sat in it, right? So we're not ignoring it in the sense that we're oblivious to it.
You don't want to become indulgent. That's not what anyone's saying. Yeah.
Nope. And then take an action, right? Yeah. And those are that for me is kind of going to be my framework, from here on out, because I think what is so beautifully put about the way that you said that, and I've got to listen to that episode. I've got to listen to that video. It is, there's something in being able to look at it. We just don't look. You said it that was such a great analogy. You just, ow, that's hot, and then you fucking you immediately turn away. Your brain even has told yourself, that's hot, don't touch. Yeah. It's like, okay, I need to, though. I need to figure this out. And it's, yeah, that's interesting. I think that's one of those things. I would even, if we just ended the episode right smack there, that it's like, hey, the permission that you get from all of this is that you can sit in it. You can sit in it, and you can look at it, because that's where you're going to find that stuff. Because if you're not willing to be there, what discoveries can you make?
I did that probably about 2 weeks ago, for what it's worth. So for everyone listening at home, my grandmother passed away a day after my birthday. And then about a week later, we had the funeral. And I remember look, she was 93, so she'd lived a good life. It was sad, but not unexpected. But it would be impossible to ignore that she's been a mainstay like my entire life, and she was the matriarch of the family. And all we ever heard from her growing up was, "I'm so lucky I have such beautiful grandchildren." So she was that woman. So she passes, and I remember it was probably about a week until the funeral, but in between those days of her passing and waiting to know when the funeral was, just really, really sad. There's no, I think you messaged me once, at least twice, just to check in and see how you're feeling. And the only word I had was sorrow. It wasn't any more complicated than that. It's like just a deep sorrow. And all the good thing was, like, I could recognize how this would feel for me. And because it's also sort of lucky that it's been rainy in Sydney for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm like, great.
Mood matching.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm buying all the comfort food. I'm turning my phone off, and I'm going to hibernate, because this is how it is right now. This is how I'm grieving right now. And really that was the process up until the funeral. We go up, we do the ceremony, we do the wake. It was lovely because she was a beautiful human. Everyone's happy to be there, and Nan would have loved this. There was no drama and not a lot of politics. And then we all came home. So sort of in my head, it was like, make it to Sunday, because it was the funeral was Thursday, come back Friday, Saturday I had some stuff to do, Sunday, just make it to Sunday. Made it to Sunday. But even then, it hasn't, I'm probably 80% fine. But even now I can sort of, because I'm prone to anxiety and depression, I can tell when my depression will swell. And that's probably one of these times, just in the wake of this sort of stuff. But I'm probably at where those are the two choices that you talked about. I just go, cool, I can understand that. That makes sense, that my body's tired or I don't have as much focus as normal. That's what's going on. That's cool. We can still knock this stuff out. I don't need to hibernate anymore. I don't need to dwell. I can functionally process, and do what I need to do. So, and probably, if I'm being honest, within 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks total, should be more or less 100%. So you're allowed. It's apples to oranges, though. I don't have the responsibilities that Brody has. He has a whole different team around him. I have my little apartment. I've gone to 4 different cafes this morning.
Sometimes I wish, my friend. Sometimes I wish.
That's all right. That's it. It's always, grass is always greener. Always greener.
Yep, that's right.
But yeah, look, it's chewing it for yourself, Misfits. Chewing it for yourself, and watch that video on shame. I think it's a good one. I think it's interesting. Yeah. That's it. That wraps us up more or less for episode 10, season 4.
50 episodes.
Did you want to talk about Patreon? You said at the beginning you wanted to talk about Patreon.
Yes, thank you. That was, I was like mulling it over, and like I was like, I just know there was more than what I'm saying here. Yeah, no. So look, Patreon. The thing that I want to talk about with you, Misfits, and I'm just precursor here. I'm doing this a little bit for social media. We have a ton of specials on there. One of the specials that we just explored recently was America versus Australia. This is kind of a common comment we get, and this is where, if we were ever going to do that kind of stuff, it is for the people that are here. They're here. They're building with us. They're watching. They're asking. They're looking. Sure, we'll put together an episode every now and then for you guys. That's American tropes against Australian
slang. And,
right.
Is everyone Steve Irwin? Yeah.
Yes. So that there's a ton there, and then on top of that, there is discounts for things like our resources, the merch. We had our first print. That is something that I think hopefully we'll talk about in season 5. That was an interesting ride getting to the print and then getting to where we are today. I think we're going to do things a little bit differently in the future with that. I think that'll play into Patreon as well. I want to know what you guys feel, because the more often that I sit and I have conversations, the more I understand that I have the right idea, but I don't have the full picture. And I think getting insights from you guys about what you would want to see, what you're willing to support. Is it just about giving a couple dollars to your favorite creator? Would you rather have that in a YouTube subscription, an Instagram subscription, or a Patreon? What works the best? Is it best to have them all available for you guys, so if you do want one, it's there and you don't have to go somewhere else? And the thing that I want to say too is you get a little bit more of an inside look. Those specials me and Chris come to just caps off, like it's just the behind the scenes. We have a topic most of the time, but we're really just there to be there. And I think you guys would enjoy that, because what you guys get from the social media clips, what you'll see here, us chopping shit up out of context and, hey, come buy the Patreon or, whatever, that stuff performs so well that I know for a fact that there's a space for it, and we have one. So now the overarching question is, do you need more access to it? Or is Patreon a good enough doorway? And I'm curious. I'm curious to see what people think. I'll chop this up. You guys let us know in the comments. Is Patreon a bust? Is it an Instagram subscription? Is it YouTube subscriptions? What is it? So let us know.
Nice. Well, there you go, Misfits. That's season 4. Thanks for being here. As always, you can watch this 2 weeks in advance, currently on Patreon, on Camp Misfit. And you can listen for free and watch us build on YouTube and on Spotify if you want to build your own podcast. Got resources. promisfitspodcast.com. A whole bunch of resources there. You can use DIY your own podcast, or if you're an industry professional, you can come work with us and see how we roll. That's it. We have plans for season 5. Got no idea what the episodes are going to be yet, what the season run is going to be, who the guests are going to be, but we'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll sort all of that out. But in the meantime, you've got tons and tons and tons of hours of content and stuff worth to get through.
50 plus.
Popping champagne to the moon. Any final sentiment for the end of season 4?
Oh, thank God it's over. Thank God it's over. If we could go into season 5 with a new mindset. This is our January 1st.
On that note, I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
He has taken a mouthful of water. And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.